Let me show you the front page of the Sun newspaper today. That is a picture of Levi Bellfield. You see the headline there. It simply says sick. Let me read you the Sun headline and then we'll go into the story. Human rights outrage is what they say. Bellfield can marry in prison. Fury over his £30,000 legal aid. Demands an engagement ring. Serial killer Levi Bellfield is to be granted his wish to wed in jail after prison bosses conceded he would win a human rights case. The monster, 55, whose victims include Milly Dowler, 13, threatened legal action to tie the knot behind bars with a besotted visitor. Bellfield, a lifer at Durham's Franklin prison, also pleaded discrimination after he was banned from having an engagement ring. The Sun can reveal that he won legal aid costing the taxpayer as much as £30,000, sparking fury. There are no current legal routes to block the marriage, with the Ministry of Justice acknowledging the pain and anger that victims' families will feel. Joining me now to discuss this, former Met Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Hello, Peter. Thank you so much. Good evening.
You're welcome.
I mean, you know, there are these occasions, in fact, we talk about them often, you and I, where something just feels wrong, it seems wrong, it goes against everything that we think we stand for, everything that we think the justice system must stand for, everything we think that prison is for. We think it's to remove people from our streets who are dangerous, but we also think there is a punitive element. They're meant to suffer loss of liberty and loss of various other things, for example, the right to vote. And I think lots of people will think the right to get married, indeed the right to foster any kind of relationship from inside a prison where you might want to get married. And yet it turns out that that's not the case, apparently.
If it seems wrong and it feels wrong, then it in all likelihood is wrong. And this is absolutely scandalous. And I now call upon Alex Chalk, King's Counsel, Member of Parliament, Minister for Justice, to pass a law. And this law only needs to read one line. Any person serving a life sentence cannot marry whilst they are in jail. One line. They can get that through Parliament before summer recess. They can delay any plans that he has for a wedding at the prison. Get this law on the statute books. And if Bellfield wants to take it to the European Court of Human Rights, and they actually want to support Bellfield instead of our newly enacted law passed through the British Parliament, then I think that throws open the whole debate once again about whether that is a court we should align ourselves to.
I mean, I in my youth, in the days when I used to present the Vanessa show on the telly, I remember presenting several shows. I know Piers Morgan does the same even today, which are essentially entitled something like, you know, I'm in love with a serial killer. They're usually American serial killers, some of them on death row, that kind of thing. And there are always these bizarrely warped and peculiar unfortunates who conceive the idea that it'd be really romantic and marvellous to fall in love with them, travel across to wherever it is, sit there right next to the electric chair and marry them. You kind of don't imagine that happening here in this country, though, do you really? You think we're too sensible for that kind of thing?
I'm not interested in this prisoner in any way, shape or form, apart from the fact that clearly I don't think he should be allowed to marry. And I'm not interested in the clearly deranged woman who wants to marry him. Who I'm interested in is Marsha McDonnell, Amelie Delagrange, Milly Dowler, who Bellfield murdered, all three of those young women and a child, and the wonderful, brilliant, heroic, courageous Kate Sheedy, who Bellfield also tried to kill. But she survived, and her evidence went a long, long way to sending that monster where he needed to be, which was behind bars forever. Let's think about those names I've just mentioned. Let's think about their loved ones, their shattered lives, their sense of loss from which they will simply never recover. And we've got prison bosses and a Ministry of Justice throwing their hands up in the air and saying, well, we can't do anything. You need to do something. You are paid out of the public purse to do something. And if Alex Chalk does not act immediately and get this one-line law rushed through Parliament with, I hope, the support of every sitting MP, then he will be somebody clearly not fit to hold high office.
Are you aware in your career, Peter, of other occasions similar to this where lifers have got married inside prison? Is this something that we're relatively familiar with? Is there something so utterly disgusting about this particular individual that this is more shocking than any predecessors who've done the same thing?
Well, sadly, these people, such as this prisoner, have such an overinflated sense of their own importance and their place in life, and particularly the pecking order of the jail in which they are incarcerated. And I mentioned people like Ian Brady, that they play the system. They play the system whilst they are incarcerated, which of course they will be there until they gasp their last. And hooray for that. These people are sick. These people are just the worst of humanity, the worst kind of people that this planet has to offer. And therefore, there is no hope of rehabilitation. There is no point of even thinking about rehabilitation. And there is absolutely no point in saying, well, we need to concede certain things to him so that he behaves himself whilst in the prison system. No. They need to be treated with an extremely firm hand, and they certainly do not be allowed rights such as this. If lawyers say it's part of their human rights, well, rights come with responsibilities. And there is a responsibility on us all not to prowl the streets of southwest London murdering brilliant young women and children. And Bellfield couldn't have that responsibility. He did the exact opposite.
How can it be his human right to have an engagement ring? How is that anyone's human right? You think all the people watching and listening to this who, for whatever reason, couldn't afford a ring, couldn't get hold of a ring, had to save up for years to get one, had to wear, the paper ring that you used to get on a cigar or something from a Christmas cracker for 5 years because they were waiting for a ring. How can it be a lifer's right to have an engagement ring, for God's sake?
It's utterly ludicrous. Look at what our human rights are, and I'm not going to name them all, but the right to free association, the right to free speech, the right to a family life, the right to work, and all those things that are enshrined in human rights. Yes, absolutely fine. But once again, rights come with responsibilities. Bellfield could not be responsible. He was a savage. Therefore, you absolutely lose the right to your rights.
Is there ever a point at which policemen and women, the police force, just feel this kind of mutinous desire to say, to uprise and say, look, we're not doing this because we have to go through all the dangers to ourselves, to life and limb, of tracking down these people, of finding them, of doing all the groundwork to arrest them, to get them to the point where they're brought to justice in our courts and then incarcerated. And then this kind of thing happens utterly to undermine all our best efforts in the most appalling way. And I mean, I know that police officers don't have the right to strike, but is there any way to make feelings known if you're a police officer and you dislike the way things are going?
One of the most important things you can possess as a detective is pragmatism. You do your job, you get the case put before the court, and when the verdict is delivered, that is the end of your work. The prison is not your business. Sentencing, most certainly, is not your business. And I'm sure that the quite brilliant Colin Sutton, the former detective who essentially led the team that finally nailed Bellfield, will be pragmatic. Privately, perhaps, he might speak as forcefully as I do. But get them to court, get the evidence, get them to court, get them convicted, and then leave the rest of the criminal justice system to do what it is employed to do.